thanks for joining Albert Whitman for this AW Author Chat. I'm Lisa White, Associate Manager Marketing and Publicity at AW, and today I'm thrilled to be chatting with author Tom Ryan. So Tom is an award-winning author of several acclaimed books for young readers. He's been nominated for multiple awards, including the White Pine Award, the Ann Connor Brymer Award, and the Amy Mathers Teen Book Award, and recently the Lambda Award. His YA mystery, Keep This to Yourself, was the winner of the 2020 ITW Thriller Award for Best YA Thriller and the 2020 Arthur Ellis Award for Best YA Crime Book. 2 of his books were Junior Library Guild selections, and 3 of his young adult novels were chosen for the ALA Rainbow List in 2013, 14, and 2020. He was a 2017 Lambda Literary Fellow in Young Adult Fiction, and today we're celebrating his 2020 Lambda Award win for Best Mystery category. Thanks for joining me, Tom.
Thanks for chatting with me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, and congratulations on the Lambda win. That's an amazing honor.
It is crazy. I still can't believe it. It was, I was nominated in a non-YA category, and so I kind of felt like that was the big reward. I had honestly no expectation to win at all. So when they announced that I'd won, I almost fell out of my seat. There were tears. I was really excited.
Yeah, I told a few people, I was like, when I saw that you won, because I was very excited too, because I know we talked about, oh, it's not a YA category, maybe we'll probably not, like we weren't expecting anything. It was just an honor to be nominated, and I definitely screamed.
Yeah, no, I screamed. It was great. So, and I mean, I am a Lambda Fellow, as you mentioned. So Lambda is a great organization, and they've been around for a long time, and they do amazing work. So it's a real honor. So yeah, pretty exciting.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about your fellowship and the award in a second, but first up, I want you to kind of share with everyone both of your books that you've done with AW and kind of give just background on what they're about.
Sure. So I've done 2 books with AW. They're both mystery thrillers. The first one is Keep This to Yourself, which came out in 2019, and it's about a young gay teen, Mac, whose best friend was the final victim of a serial killer a year before the story begins. So he lives in this small town on the coast called Camera Cove, and a year before the book begins, a serial killer killed 4 people and then disappeared without a trace. And so at the beginning of the book, Mac has just finished high school. He's trying to move on with his life. He's trying to get over his best friend's death. And he finds a clue that his best friend had left him that Mac overlooked, that basically indicated that his friend Connor had been on the case and he wanted Mac's help, but Mac missed the note. And so when he finds it a year later, he's struck with all this guilt. He has a lot of survivor's guilt to begin with, and he decides to start digging into the investigation on his own because the police have kind of given up on it. And things kind of go from there. There are lots of twists and turns, and it was a lot of fun to write. It was my first mystery, and I really love this book. It was fun to write, and people seem to really like it.
The ending, and then you don't see it. You don't see the ending coming. It's great.
Yeah, that's what people keep telling me, is that one twist happens that kind of throws you into another series of twists, and then by the end you don't know what to believe. And then I don't want to say too much about it, but it's got some cool surprises.
It does.
And then my next mystery came out in October. It's called I Hope You're Listening. And it's the story of Dee, who is a high school, we don't say junior, senior in Canada, but I think she'd be a junior. She's in what we would say grade 11. And 10 years before the book begins, she was playing with her best friend, Sibby, in the forest behind their subdivision. And her best friend, Sibby, was kidnapped, and Dee was the only witness to the kidnapping. 2 guys in masks took her, and Dee was the only person who could possibly help bring her back because she saw the whole thing go down, but she wasn't able to come up with any clues that helped the authorities find her friend. So her friend has been missing for 10 years, and clearly Dee has struggled for a long time with survivor's guilt, with feelings of regret that she wasn't able to do more to get her best friend back. And so as a way to kind of feel like she's making a difference and to give back, Dee decides to start a podcast, a true crime podcast that she records in her bedroom. She disguises her voice, And the premise of the podcast is, let's try and find some missing people. Let's reunite missing people with their loved ones. And so by the time the story begins, Dee has had this podcast for, about a year, and it's become a surprise success, and actually has developed a really big following of people that start calling themselves the Laptop Detective Agency. And they listen to Dee's show, and then they go online and they try and search for clues, and in some cases they've been successful finding missing people. So that's kind of where things are at the beginning of the book. And then unexpectedly, another young girl goes missing from the same neighborhood Dee grew up in, and there's indications that that case is connected somehow to the 10-year-old case of her best friend. And Dee has to decide if she wants to risk her anonymity to start digging into this new case, whether she wants to find out if how far she wants to go into looking into Sibby's disappearance, and things kind of unfold from there. So it's a totally different kind of mystery. It's not a murder mystery like Keep This to Yourself, which is sort of your classic whodunit. This one has actually 3 mysteries going on at once. There's the mystery of her best friend from 10 years ago. There's the new girl who's gone missing. And then there's another case that takes place in the podcast and unfolds throughout the run of the book. So it was a more complicated book to write. And I was really pleased to see that it got some recognition a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and it's I would say it's really got a great thriller feel to it. Like as you're reading it, like that pace of it, especially towards the end, like it just keeps really going, and it has that really great like suspense thriller feel.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that. Yeah, the end has a chase scene that I really like writing. It was a fun scene to write, and it's one of those scenes that just kind of, the book sort of evolved. I plot things out very exhaustively, but I leave room for surprises. And by the time I got to that chase scene, I hadn't intended on there being one. And it really sort of took over several chapters near the end of the book. And I hear from people about that scene more than anything else in the book. People really enjoy that final act when all the stuff really kind of, all the threads start to come together and the action really starts to ramp up. So
Yeah, I was
fun
reading the manuscript on a plane when I was flying to LA, and I was at the end of it and didn't get to finish it. And I got up to play it, ended up reading in the car, like from the airport, because I was like, I don't want to wait. Like I started like in that scene of like when you're mid chase, you're like, oh, I wonder what's happening. It's like going so fast. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, I think as any writer wants their readers to kind of have that experience, you just want to keep getting through, find out what happens. But thrillers in particular, if you can get that sort of reaction from readers, you've done something right.
Exactly. Now, with both of these books, what inspired you to kind of go into this genre and to write both of these books?
Pardon me. I've been writing YA fiction in Canada for about a decade, and my previous young adult novels had been very straightforward contemporary books about teens in the real world, dealing with relationships, all that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed writing those books, and they were received well. But I got to a certain point where I decided I wanted to kind of stretch myself as a writer, and I wanted to move in a different direction. And in the 10 years since I've started writing YA, queer YA in particular, there has been an explosion of young adult fiction for and about LGBTQ teens. And the stuff that I was writing early on was kind of reflective of what was going on in the landscape. But over time, there was a lot more genre stuff happening. So science fiction, fantasy, you name it. And I decided that I wanted to write mysteries because I'd always read mysteries growing up. I'm sorry, you might hear a weird noise. My dog is snoring over in the corner.
We don't mind. I love a pet appearance in any sort of video.
Buddy, come on. Yeah, he's awake. Sorry, that was a bit distracting. So long story short, I've always loved mysteries. I grew up on mysteries. Everything from Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys right through to like really dark Stephen King thrillers, Agatha Christie, everything in between. And so I decided that I was going to tackle a mystery about a gay teen detective, because that was some representation I didn't see growing up. There were no queer kids that I was seeing in fiction for teens back in the 90s. I mean, there were a couple of books, but you had to really search them out. And there certainly weren't any gay teen detectives. And, when you're reading at any point in your life, but certainly when you're a young person, you want to identify with the main characters. And I think that would have been very meaningful for me to see a teen that kind of was like me going on this wild mystery adventure. And so that was kind of how I came up with the idea for Keep This to Yourself. I'd had another idea for another contemporary, straightforward book about 5 friends who'd been really close as kids and then grew apart by high school graduation. And they all came together for this time capsule opening. And I was just going to explore each of the teens. Why are they no longer close? That kind of thing. And I took that idea and I kind of smashed it into a mystery and started asking myself, what if one of those teens from the original group was dead and had been murdered? And then things kind of went from there.
That's really cool.
And so by the time I finished that book, because Keep This to Yourself is really quite dark, I think there's optimism and hope in it. It's a fun ride, but it's a serial killer. Exactly. And some of the stuff that is revealed is, there's some very dark secrets. Yeah. And so I wanted to write something that was a bit more optimistic. And so that's how I came to I Hope You're Listening, which, without giving too much away, the premise is missing people. We don't know what happened to them. And in some of these cases, there's hope there that they might still be out there somewhere. And I mean, realistically, we all know that, the vast majority of missing people don't come home. Many of them are killed. There are a lot of really sad outcomes to abductions, but there are people who are recovered. And so that's kind of what I wanted to lean into with this book, that Dee kind of reclaims her story, empowers herself, and begins to, sets out on a journey to try and bring people back together. And I thought that was a more optimistic way to begin a story, and things kind of played out from there.
I think also with I Hope You're Listening to that, she goes through this, not only finding her identity through this anonymous voice that she is and who she is as a person through the podcast, but I also like that she's experiencing that as she meets this new girl that moves to town and how she feels about her and coming to terms with her sexuality. Like you talking about, how you wrote Keep This to Yourself for the teen that you were. I felt that way reading I Hope You're Listening, seeing this character that wasn't straight, but like didn't make a big fuss about what she was, but kind of was finding out how she felt about that. That would have been so much to me as a teen as well, because that just didn't exist in contemporary YA that I was reading when I was growing up either. So I think that journey to see her find her identity as a person, but also who she is on so many levels, is such a wonderful part of that book as well.
Yeah, and I think I do a lot of school visits. I've met so many teens, in high school classrooms, library presentations, and also a lot of LGBTQ, Gay Straight Alliance, that kind of group. I've done lots of presentations to queer teens, and something that keeps coming back over and over and over again is that coming out stories are really important. I think that the coming out story is a universal. It's like a love story. There's never going to be, we should never stop publishing coming out stories. But beyond that, there are so many other things that can be happening in a book. And so in both of these books, and Keep This to Yourself, there's more of Mac is gay. His family and friends know he's gay, but he's got a little bit of a struggle going on because he was in love with his straight best friend. So that kind of ties into the story. But with I Hope You're Listening, for sure, she's just queer, and that's not ever a struggle. She's just, she gets a crush on the new girl across the street, and that becomes part of the story. But
it's not
more than, it's not important that they're queer. It's just important that they start to kind of have eyes for each other.
Yeah, it's just part of her life, and that's what I really loved, especially because like her family doesn't make a deal about it, and like you said, coming out stories are wonderful, but like that was pretty much all I saw. Either like coming out stories or trauma around being LGBTQ when I was growing up. So I the struggle for myself as a queer woman, like that's all I saw. So if I would have saw something like this where it was just who she was and her family didn't even make a deal about it, because that is so much the experience for so many queer people, and that's something that's still, unfortunately, it's trying to be more represented in literature, but it wasn't for a really long time. So I think that's such an important facet of this book. It's seeing it's just another aspect of who Dee is, but it's not her whole identity.
exactly.
Now, like I said, you did just win the 2021 Lambda or 2020 Lambda Award win for mystery category. Congratulations again. That's so amazing. Do you want to talk a little about not only what Lambda is, in case folks don't know, but your experience as a fellow and then also how it felt to win?
Yeah, so Lambda is the world's largest LGBTQ literary organization, and they do a whole lot of things. They have all sorts of programs. They do a writing in the school, writers in the school program. They have, you know, presentations and all kinds of cool stuff. And the way that I first became really intimately involved with Lambda is back in 2017. I was chosen to fly to LA and be one of the Lambda Literary Fellows. And so the fellowship, the Emerging Writers Retreat, they call it, is an opportunity for queer writers of all stripes and backgrounds to come together in one space, workshop their work, share their work, kind of hang out in this big, wonderful queer literary community environment, and just kind of learn about your progress as a writer. They have 5 cohorts. They have poetry, fiction, nonfiction, playwriting, and young adult. And so I was in the young adult cohort. Melinda Lowe led us, and I think there were 10 or 12 of us in the group, and we each brought a project to workshop. And so during the days, we would all workshop our material. We would, share ideas with one another. We were critiquing each other's stuff very positively. And then in the evenings, we would have big readings where people would get up and read their poetry or do a scene from a play they'd written. I had to get up one evening and read a chapter from the book I was working on. And the book that I workshopped was I Hope You're Listening. And it wasn't called that at that point. I can't even remember what the title was, but I had this idea. I'd written a few chapters, and I knew that I really wanted to dig into it. So I learned a lot about the book. I learned a lot about, my place, how I feel that I'm positioned in the queer literary tradition, especially writing for young people. I met some amazing people, and I left feeling really strong, really, really good about my manuscript. And so that was clearly 4 years ago. And, every book has a long road to publication, but, the book came out, and, all my friends in the cohort had nice things to say. They all bought it and read it, and we all support one another, and that's great. And then I got nominated for LGBTQ Mystery at the Lambda Awards. So the Lambda Awards, are one of the big things that Lambda does every year. Typically, it's a big gala party in New York, which would have been a lot of fun. But just generally, it's this amazing experience where you see all these amazing categories, all this queer material. And I was completely shocked to be nominated. I did not expect to be nominated at all. And to me, I think I mentioned this to you before we started recording. For me, it was a YA book nominated in just a general category. And so I kind of felt like there's no chance I'm going to win. I can always say I'm a Lambda finalist. That's fantastic. I'm so excited. And so I watched the award show, literally zero thinking that I would win. Because I just wanted to watch, and it was a fun show. And then I won, and it was totally bananas. I can't even really explain to you how unreal the experience was. It was really, really exciting. I cried. I was just completely shocked. And it was a couple of weeks ago, and I still am kind of pinching myself. So it feels really full circle for me to have taken this book, workshopped it within that really supportive environment, and then to have it, recognized this way is just great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the full circle of it is just so lovely and beautiful. Yeah. So, in addition, I do want to talk about some of the other awards, not only for I Hope You're Listening, but, it was a finalist for Crime Writers of Canada Award. It was a starred selection by the Canadian Children's Book Center for 2021 Best Books for Kids and Teen. I wouldn't be surprised if we have some more accolades down the line since it is still new. And then your first book, I know you got a few of the awards there with you. I want to talk about and just kind of highlight some of those. It was ALA Rainbow Book List was for Keep This to Yourself. It won the John Spray Mystery Award finalist. It was an Amy Mathers Teen Book Award finalist. It won the Ann Connor Brymer Award. It was picked by Quill and Choir as one of the books of the year. It was listed by Globe and Mail as one of the top 100. So many accolades. The Author Ellis that won Best Crime Book. ITW Thriller Award it won as well. You want to share some of those and just kind of talk about the experience of, we
Sure.
knew that
I have.
yourself was going to be a big, a great book, but I think it's wonderful when as publishers, we know like we believe in all of our books, we love them, but when you put it out there and then you see such an overwhelming response of people loving it, it's that just that, solidifying that like, yeah, this is something that's a really important book. So I want to share some of those and the experience of that.
Yeah, well, I think the my biggest takeaway, and I do want to show the awards because I love them so much. This is the Thriller Award.
I love
I
yeah,
actually,
it's so pretty.
and what R.L. Stine announced this online last year, which was really cool because I sat on a panel with him at Thriller Fest a few years ago, and he was really funny and really nice. And then the Crime Writers of Canada has this really cool statue. It's called the Hanged Man, and so that was amazing to be recognized by the Canadian Crime Writers Association. So it is, I mean, it's really fun. It's really exciting to win awards. But for me, the big takeaway is that I've been, it's that old an overnight success in 10 years kind of thing, because I'd been writing for 8 years, publishing for 8 years by the time Keep This came out. And, things have gone well. But then to have a book recognized and for it to explode and to be kind of part of the conversation was unusual and new to me. And what I've taken away from that, and what I think the Lambda Award has really kind of cemented in my mind, is that moving into mysteries and thrillers was a good choice for me. It's a good fit for me. And I know that as a writer, I've written a lot of different kinds of things, but I've never felt as comfortable or as excited about my material as I do when I'm writing a thriller. I really enjoy the process. I think it's something that I have kind of you grow as a writer with every book. And I feel like I'm really keen to get even better and better at writing mysteries and thrillers. And, to have other people say you're doing it well means a great deal to me. So I think at the end of the day, I'm just really happy to know that people like my stuff, and that, especially with these awards for these two books in particular, it means, it says to me that I should stay on this track, which makes me happy because this is what I'd like to be doing for a very long time.
Yeah, and especially as an author and a writer, it's nice to know that it's an isolated career. You do your thing and you write your stuff and you work with a publisher, but like you're in it and it's very insular while you're creating a book. So it's sometimes hard, I know, as a fellow writer too, like it's hard to know if like you're hitting the mark. So it's always nice when everyone's like, yeah, like you feel that feeling of like, I think this is my place. But it's nice to have that really visual confirmation and from everyone that like you're on the right path.
And I just have to say that it's all very exciting. It's been interesting to have it all happen online because of the pandemic, because these are moments I was the kind of kid who would give Oscar speeches to my dog when I was 7. And so I've been kind of, my whole life I've dreamed of something like this happening. And so it's very exciting, and it's interesting to see it all play out on Zoom. Honestly, like all of these shows have happened online virtually, which is kind of cool in some ways because in the good old days, you went to an awards gala or an awards show or whatever, and it would be whoever was in the room. But now it's a lot more accessible to people. So my folks were able to watch, and friends of mine have been able to watch, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think that especially I noticed that with the Lammys, there was a lot of people that weren't award winners or weren't even adjacent to award winners, but still wanted to go and watch because they had some incredible talent presenting. They had, they're just part of the community and they wanted to be supportive. And that's, like you said, something that's not accessible if they're not nominated previously. So it's a really bigger audience that gets to see your book. But it has been interesting because I think for people watching that don't know, both of your books, Keep This to Yourself came out before the pandemic, but the time of when it would be winning a lot of awards was right as it hit. And same kind of with I Hope You're Listening. So yeah, you have I felt kind of bad because I was like, you haven't got to put on like a tux and go to any award.
Trying to put on a tux.
What a lot, but like you, I mean, you know, you can still dress up, but I'm like, man, we haven't got to fly Tom out for any award.
Well,
To make it like a super award ceremony and just have like a really nice meal, and you can stand up and give us like a couple of speeches.
the reality is, I mean, it's my anxiety would be through the roof if I had to actually go to one of these things. I mean, it would be really cool, but it's awfully hard to complain about the way things have played out.
I don't miss the anxiety of public speaking because I've presented a couple of webinars and stuff during the pandemic, and then later been like, oh, there were 800 people watching. If I would have been in the room, I would have.
Exactly.
Is the silver lining of the last year and a half.
Yeah, you're right.
So going back to your books, I did want to, you know, highlight. I always like to ask authors this. I know it's hard, like picking your favorite child kind of situation, but do you have a favorite moment or scene from both of your books?
Well, for I Hope You're Listening, I think it has to be the chase scene at the end, which I just really enjoyed writing it. It came out of left field for me. I think I mentioned that I tend to plot my books really intensively. I'll sometimes spend months just plotting with index cards and thinking, making sure that everything is lined up so that when I sit down to write, I have a really solid roadmap. And I know that's not how everybody works, but it works for me. And with mysteries especially, I don't want to get lost on sidetracks. But the chase scene at the end, I did not plan for. It just kind of happened. And so I think that was a really extra fun for me to write because it just sort of emerged. And then in Keep This to Yourself, I would say that the scene that I really like to read when I do readings is when Mac and Doris explore the abandoned house where the serial killer was camped out, because it's really creepy. And that particular house that I wrote is based on a place. I actually just described a place that I actually used to go with my brothers. We grew up in the country, and there was an old abandoned house back in the forest, kind of half falling down with a really creepy root cellar. And we weren't supposed to go in there, but of course we did. And so I had these really vivid memories of this house. And so writing that scene felt very comfortable and natural to me. And I was able to kind of get the detail stuff out of the way without even thinking about it, and then focus on making it really creepy and really atmospheric. And it's a scene I still really like to read when I do public readings.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing I love about Keep This to Yourself. I mean, there's multiple things, but I do love how you really bring to life the area that it's set in and the setting. Like every time they're in the caves, like, oh, so good. Like I can picture it in my mind, like crawling through a cave and like the, you know, water rushing in and the sound of, you know, the water and everything. It's super vivid. And then I had to share my favorite too with I Hope You're Listening. Well, it's not really well, I don't want to give it away, but like the tension, the romantic tension, like you pace that really well in the sense that like when I was reading, I was like, especially as an adult now, I mean, nostalgic, like, oh, there were girls I like so had crushes on that I would like certain moments I was like, oh, I can imagine that as a child, like, you know, as a teen, like it was such a good tension that I think you really feel as a teen with that push pull when you start to have feelings for someone and you haven't really had a lot of relationship experience before. Like, oh, it was so good. It was like one of those like warm, fuzzy feelings reading it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think it was my first time writing a female protagonist, and I was a bit nervous about that. I did it with a lot of thought, and you know, I tried to be really conscious about stepping out of my own reality to write somebody that existed in sort of a separate sphere. And in some ways, I found it really freeing to write that romance just completely as an observer. And I'm glad that it played out that way. I'm glad that I really liked those two characters together. I think they had a really sweet sort of bond and interaction, and they complement one another in the way that, you know, a lot of the best relationships do, and especially when you see two teens together who are kind of opposites attract, but they just fit. That's kind of what I was going for with that. So,
and it wasn't a lot of teen lit that has romance. It's very like kind of corny and cheesy, and it's all about the romance, or a very tense romance. And
Yeah.
this, like, I mean, there is that tension and push pull, but they're also just friends. And like as they're going, especially towards the end, and going through these, I would say, yeah, they're like adventures, going through these, experiences and adventures together. They also just have a normal relationship as friendship. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes that gets lost whenever there is a romantic aspect. And so I love that that's because it's very, the thing I like about both your books, and like I said, especially with the queer angles, is like it is still like this is just they're a normal person. This is their normal experience. It's just part of who they are. But like to see people, because we don't see it a lot in literature, just having a normal life, having those friendships, doing things. It's not their whole identity. I think that's so important for a younger generation that we, especially as adults, realize that we didn't really have. So it's great to know that younger readers get to have that.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, I want to thank you once again for chatting about this, both of your books. I want to thank you for creating these wonderful books, obviously. And it's been such a wonderful journey to work with you on these books and to see them just shine. And congrats again about the Lammy and all the awards, but especially the Lambda. That's such an amazing honor, and especially to happen during Pride Month. That's just a cherry on top.
Sure.
So congrats again. I want to remind everyone, Tom can hold his books up again. But both keep this to yourself, and I hope you're listening are available now. And I hope your listening will actually be available in paperback this fall with I believe the Lambda sticker will be on it. I think we just got it to print, so that'll be exciting. But thank you so much, Tom, again for joining me. This has been wonderful to chat.
It
Um,
was. Thank you so much, and hopefully by this time next year we'll see each other in person at some sort of event.
I know. And then, Tom, if you want to share how folks can follow you, I just want to make sure that they can follow you online and find all your books.
Everything is Tom Ryan Author. You can find me on Twitter at Tom Ryan Author, Instagram at Tom Ryan Author, Facebook Tom Ryan Author, although I don't really use Facebook. You can certainly find me on Twitter and Instagram. And my website, if you want to learn more about my books, a little bit more about me, is tomryanauthor.com.
Perfect. And if you go to albertwhitman.com and search Tom Ryan or either of the book names, you'll be able to have that pop up and purchase the book. And you can also purchase it from your favorite bookseller. Thanks so much again, Tom. Keep watching for more AW author chats. Thanks so much.
Thank you.